Well, you thought Dave Gettleman was bad. Okay. It's Brian Gain, right? Just off the top of my head, Bloom, the Texans GM. Uh, what are you doing here? As we look at the Texans and they're going through their draft. Now, some interesting names, certainly interesting as we get to the mid rounds, but up at the top, Bloom, this one's a bit of a head scratcher for, I don't know, everyone, because it came across the board. I was in Nashville and the Broncos had just picked, but, come across the board and it was Titus Howard, tackle from Alabama State. Okay, in the first round, tackle was on the list of their team needs. You looked at their needs before the draft. You felt offensive line, cornerback. They'd probably grab a tight end there. Well, they did, but they get a tackle from Alabama State in the first round. Titus Howard, maybe the greatest guy ever, greatest player of all time. I don't know, but this was odd, unusual for the first round. Lonnie Johnson, cornerback from Kentucky, second round. Max Sharping, tackle, Northern Illinois, in the second round as well. Third round, Kahali Waring. And I want to read his whole name for you, Bloom.
Yeah,
I'm going to
please.
take that out of Dane Brugler's draft guide, but his whole name is awesome. Tight end from San Diego State, very raw at the position. Kind of scares me. San Diego State running backs excite me. San Diego State tight ends scare me. But athletic, just learning the position, blah, 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 blah. Charles
Polo.
Was that?
He was a water polo player.
Yes, very good. Like our man Lunchbox from PFF. Anyway, Josh Liskowitz, by the way. Good friend of the show. Yeah, I say Lunchbox lovingly.
Yeah, we love Josh.
Charles Omenihu, defensive end, Texas. Xavier Crawford, cornerback, Central Michigan. And Cullen Gillespie, running back, Texas A&M, to round things out. But, oh, man, Titus Howard. Let's talk about this one.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Well, we led off the NFC South with Atlanta, talking about how much they needed to fix certain spots in their offensive line. It's even worse for Houston. And they went into this draft. If they weren't going to come away, and cornerback to an extent, they didn't come away with these positions. They're in maybe not a Super Bowl window, maybe a Super Bowl window, certainly a window of sustained playoff appearances, and one with Deshaun Watson where we don't want to hear about collapsed lungs anymore. We don't want to see him taking those hits. And they did balance the offense more in the second half of the year. And remember, they had 2 second-round picks. They're actually able to get 2 linemen and a corner in the first 2 rounds. And, of course, they get that extra second-round pick from the Dwayne Brown deal. They could probably use Dwayne Brown right now. But they get a player a lot like Dwayne Brown in a sense. See, you remember how surprising was Dwayne Brown in the first round when they got him?
Very surprising.
Very surprising. Although I think Russ Landy, our man, that leads back to Josh Liskowitz, was not surprised by it. And Lance Zierlein, Houston, finger on the pulse, was not surprised by the Titus Howard pick. If he floated Titus Howard's name out there as a potential first-round pick. Now, the question that we'll continue to ask ourselves, and one thing about the draft that's fun, is players' destinies get tied together, right? One player becomes part of the story of another player. They become part of each other's stories. In this case, it's Andre Dillard, because there's the Eagles sitting at 25, and we talked about this during the NFC East, the relationship between Philadelphia and Baltimore. The GMs, they move up to 22. They get Andre Dillard, who most people had as the best pure pass blocking air raid guy, Washington State. And by the way, the insurgent warfare and football class that Mike Leach is doing is starting now to show some of their slides, like tactics for anti-insurgent in Somalia, and the plays we beat Houston with last year. That's an actual title of one of the classes, insurgent warfare. So maybe there's a new emerging field for us to push in. What lessons we can learn from war and football, and vice versa. Well, the lesson from war here is that through back channels, Philly gets ahead of Houston. Houston is sitting there. If Dillard had fallen to them, we'd say perfect first round. Perfect. There could not be a more perfect player for this team to fall to them at 23. And instead, they end up taking Titus Howard. But this book on Titus Howard is athleticism, size, tools, everything you want at left tackle. Played at Alabama State. Did play Auburn and looked, reasonable. So there's something there. Think Desmond Harrison last year. Now, Harrison had some other questions that made him fall all the way out of the draft. Ended up starting left tackle for Cleveland. Similar kind of proposition here. First round pick. Second round pick, Max Sharping. Kind of the opposite of Howard. where it's more his recovery skills, how smart and competitive he is, not necessarily projectable as a big upside guy, but leader, grit, toughness, all that stuff. And then they get Lonnie Johnson, and Lonnie Johnson's one of those players. See, so I saw some people saying the plan for the first round for the Steelers was just please don't take Lonnie Johnson. And the reason that had to be the plan was that he might be athletically the most ideal cornerback in this class. But he needs a lot of work when it comes time to actually play his position. But athletically, he's everything that you want. So again, another project for the coaches. By the book here, just checking off those needs. None of these players were great values where they got them. At least in the Howard and Johnson, you can project them being excellent players down the line if things come around. Likewise with Waring. What's interesting about Waring is this is a repeat, right? They took Jordan Thomas last year. They took Jordan Akins, some athleticism, moldable athleticism, pass-catching tight ends. Waring is the next in line, maybe the highest ceiling of them all. And you have, as we look down the rest of their draft, as they got past their needs, again, you see this team like some of these other teams, and scouts want to pound the table for the players with the ceiling. Omenihu is yet another player that, so you see this players in the first and second round that maybe some had lower. Omenihu was a second-day pick on a lot of boards. He can play 3-4 end. He can line up on the edge. He's got a body that he can play a lot of roles, and he has a lot of athletic traits that you want. His game hasn't come together yet, but there's a lot of potential there. Crawford is a little corner with speed, knows how to cover. So it's funny, like if you took Xavier Crawford's skills as a corner and you put them together with Lonnie Johnson's body, you'd have the first cornerback off the board in this draft. We'll see how that turns out for them. And they got a fullback. And I think the story about the fullback cease was that the media was interviewing him at the Senior Bowl, and they were doing some sort of special teams drill, and he just ran right back mid-interview to the field because he was so excited to do the drill. So every team needs a guy like that, like the guy with the dog with his tail wagging, just to be out there on the football field. That's what they got in Gillespie.
All right. I've got his full name. By the way, this I consider Dane Brugler the best NFL draft analyst that there is out there.
Yeah.
Worked under Gil Brandt, spent countless hours with C.O. Bricado. Dane is a close friend of both of ours. I love his work. I think Matt Waldman's the best when it comes to skill position players. Dane is the best when it comes to all players. So every year I buy his draft guide and I print it out, actually. So here's Kahale Waring's full name, just because it's interesting. Get and watch me hack everything.
Okay.
Kahale, Kuyo, Kalani, Michael, Wodehouse, Waring.
Yeah, this is kind of like Hu'omana Wanui. You got to get those pauses in there.
Yeah, at least that was one name. These are all different. These are all separate names.
Yeah.
Kahale, Kuyo, Kalani, Michael, Wodehouse, Waring. I love the Michael.
It's the 21st century. We don't need to just have three names for
exactly.
kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's do it. Let's talk about the undrafted guys. Now, Demaria Crockett was a player that a couple years ago burst onto the scene as a freshman. And he's one of those players, like when people ask me, what about this guy? Like I pay attention when they're draft eligible, but there are certain players. I remember when, Leonard Fournette was a freshman, stuff like that. There are certain players when they're freshmen and they're like, oh, shut your mouth. Oh, hey, what's going on here? Like, Demaria Crockett was one of those players running back from Mizzou that I was watching at that time. Shoulder injury 2017, 2018 committee, now undrafted. But the Texans get what I think could be a steal or a sleeper here from the undrafted group. What do you think?
Yeah, there's some interesting names here because they have opportunity at the bottom of the depth chart at wide receiver and running back, and especially running back in fantasy. This should interest us because Lamar Miller is still a solid back. They're not spending a lot of capital to try to replace him. They did spend capital to get Deontay Foreman 2 years ago. He had that Achilles tear. We still haven't seen a running back come back to form after that. And then wide receiver, you have all these injuries, QT and Fuller. So Johnny Dixon from Ohio State, a burner. He can make this team. You mentioned Crockett. So the training camp, undrafted. You come to this show for the undrafted free agent names, camp battles. Not just undrafted free agent, but undrafted free agent camp battles. The one to watch is Karan Higdon from Michigan and Crockett. Crockett is more of the athlete. Crockett is the more dynamic back. Higdon is more of a steady producer, downhill runner between the tackles. So whoever lands in that spot, and remember, they also have Buddy Howell, who they nabbed off of Miami's practice squad, a big back. So those three names, I want to see which one of those three make the team, because that is exactly the kind of player seats that we talk about in December, having fantasy value, the third string back, maybe if Foreman doesn't come all the way back soon, the second string back for the Texans.
The Colts draft, I really want to talk about one player. Spoiler alert, Paris Campbell. But I really want to get to the undrafted guys. So I'm going to go through this like lightning and then blaze through so we can get to the undrafted. You know who I'm talking about, who they got undrafted. That's the guy I want to talk about. But second round for the Colts, Rock Ya-Sin, cornerback from Temple. Insert your jokes here. Ben Benogu, edge from TCU. Paris Campbell, wide receiver, Ohio State. Wow, Ohio State had some pretty good Mr. McLovin and Paris Campbell. And Paris Campbell, that supreme athlete. That would be so sweet with Andrew Luck in this passing game. Good job, Colts. We'll continue the conversation. Robert Okereke, linebacker, Stanford. Kerry Willis, safety, Michigan State. Marvel Tell, safety, USC. EJ Speed, linebacker, Tarleton State. Wow. Jerry Green, edge from Mississippi State. Jackson Barton, tackle from Utah. Javon Patterson, center from Ole Miss. Bloom, let's talk about the Colts draft, and please hurry so we can get to that undrafted group.
Yeah, again, you come here for undrafted free agent camp battles, and fast forward over the players they spent draft picks on. That's boring. It's the players that they got after the draft that are good. But look, there's a lot to talk about here, because Chris Ballard, it's just like Bill Belichick, right? If you see your team, and we're going to talk about a team at the end of this episode, where if you see your team just sitting there on their hands during the draft, not trading up, not trading down, not really doing anything, you should be very wary, because the good GMs, the good decision makers, have convictions one way or the other, so that they know when it's time to trade up. They know when it's time to trade down. And the Colts absolutely fit that. And I suppose Chris Ballard tipped this off, and he said there were 8 players that they were considering at 26. And they ended up taking none of them at 26. Maybe they took them at 34 and 49 because they trade down. They trade down with Washington. Washington moves up to get Montez Sweat. They go down from 26 to 46, and they trade down again from 46 to 49 and pick up an extra pick, an extra 5th. And remember, they also had the second round pick from the Sam Darnold trade last year. So they get Washington's second round pick next year. And because they have number 34 from the Jets, and think about this, folks, if you haven't already done your rookie drafts, think about this in your rookie drafts or in fantasy drafts in general, that if you have another pick coming up, then if you're trading down, you're not really trading down to the pick you traded down to. You're just trading down to your next pick. You're still somewhat likely, you have the luxury to trade down farther when you have an extra pick coming up. I think Chris Ballard understood that. They get Rock Ya-Sin. He very well could have been the Steelers pick at number 20 if they had stayed home and not moved up for Devin Bush. A scout's dream at corner, high ceiling, late riser. Ben Benogu, and we saw LJ Collier go in the first round, the glass eater, not necessarily the most athletic, where Benogu is the projectable edge rusher. And there last year, they took Kamoko Toure in the second round and Tyquan Lewis. Toure and Benogu with those upside. It's another second round pick, Paris Campbell. Speed. But you don't see it a lot on Ohio State tape because they used him mainly on crossers and things underneath. But there's a projection there for his route running. Some people saw it in the Senior Bowl. At the combine and the drills. And then they're very, very happy with him, I think. So it's a slot presence, but also a deep presence. And this was a pick that almost unanimously, everybody that covers the Colts wanted this pick to happen. Some even thought he could be the pick at 26. So, again, Chris Ballard winning here. Bobby Okereke, you hit with Darius Leonard, you get a very similar player in Okereke. The length, rangy player can affect the game in a lot of different ways. They actually give up 2 fourth-round picks to move up for Willis, the safety, high character, leader, and more of a box safety, maybe to cover tight ends. But you have Malik Hooker, who they took 2 years ago, who's the ultimate center fielder, the ultimate Earl Thomas type. So you can afford to have a safety who isn't going to necessarily be able to turn and run with speed guys or cover that ground at the back end of the defense if he's left out there. And then they get Tell, who is almost opposite of Willis, who is an incredible athlete, maybe more of a finesse safety. And see, if you hear finesse safety, well, you better be somebody like a Reggie Nelson or a Malik Hooker type to cover that ground. He has the athleticism to do that. They get a developmental rusher in Green. They get a tough and athletic offensive lineman late. The thing is, it's almost like, we have people we respect in the fantasy industry so much so, and by the way, speed from Tarleton State provides speed, but athleticism, Barton and Patterson. And Patterson was a center for Mississippi, so he's tested. But you watch drafts and see sometimes it'll even make you go back because of the respect and say, well, I didn't really agree with that, but now I have to go back and look, because if Chris Ballard thinks that, then I've got to see what I missed.
Right, and that's another part. There's so many layers to the draft. It's like, wait a second, what? What did I miss? What's going on? And you highlight that very apropos. Now, let's get to Penny Hart.
Yes.
Penny Hart. That's a Senior Bowl performer. Wide receiver from Georgia State. Uncoverable.
Yeah.
I mean, just quickness, speed, routes, hands, small catch radius. Okay, if you want to go over the negatives. But man alive, I love Penny Hart. Absolutely loved watching him play at the Senior Bowl. Proved that he could go against the best seniors in the nation and scorch them, school them, make them look stupid. That's what Penny Hart did. Why the hell he fell undrafted, I don't know. But man alive, Chris Ballard and the Colts, you crushed it with that one, brother. Let's talk a little Penny Hart. Oh, yeah, and the other guys too.
Yeah, sure. Well, we're talking wide receivers here. And they have, they signed Devin Funchess. They drafted Paris Campbell. We'll see about Deion Kane. They still have Chester Rogers, although now you look at, I think it was a $2 or $3 million RFA contract. Now you have these names where you're going to be looking at that money, and you're looking at Penny Hart and Ashton Doolin. We'll get Ashton Doolin out of the way first. Tiny school player, size and speed. They definitely can develop him and see what they can get down the line, the element that he can add on the outside. But Penny Hart, like you said, uncoverable. And what's the answer here? It's just he didn't get a combine invite. This goes along with Anderson and Ozigbo and some of these other guys. It doesn't make sense. He should have been invited to the combine. Again, almost unanimously, everybody who was at the Senior Bowl said, wow. And Penny Hart was doing the things that you wanted to see Andy Isabella do, right?
Right.
I mean, Isabella comes in with this rep, and Penny Hart's actually the guy that nobody can cover. Crafty, smart route runner, telling the story. Just understands how to keep his opponent off balance. And you match that with offensive mind like Frank Reich, quarterback like Andrew Luck. I'll be shocked if he doesn't make the team. And I think that he actually is better, much better. And that's not to say Paris Campbell can't grow as a route runner. He's light years ahead of Paris Campbell when you're talking about running the route tree. So I almost wonder if he can get some time early, because he is exactly what this offense was missing. I know people love Paris Campbell, but Penny Hart is a Jamison Crowder type of player. And remember, Jamison Crowder didn't test all that well, but you watch Jamison Crowder, it's just like defensive backs. Tell me it's a 40 time, sure, but what are your instincts? How do you react? How aware are you? Those kind of players, the 40 time doesn't necessarily tell you the story of how fast they play. So Penny Hart is a wonderful, wonderful player. And they had him in for a visit pre-draft. And I remember tweeting out like, yes, this is the team player marriage we want. And in some ways, the players that don't get drafted in the 6th, 7th round and fall out of the draft, it may be better for them in the long run because they can find their ideal home. This is the ideal home for Penny Hart.
By the way, Crowder good at the Senior Bowl too. So
yeah.
Penny Hart, ladies and gentlemen. Penny blank Hart. And by the way, Darius Fountain, they got last year as an undrafted guy who did not go to the combine. We're stumbling across, not necessarily stumbling, but we're highlighting something today that like, come on, combine committee. Come on, this is stupid.
Right. Or maybe ridiculous. They have the last laugh. Maybe none of these guys make the team or amount to much, and they can say, no, we were right. But these are the fun stories to follow. This is why we love doing this, Cecil.
If Penny Hart became this year's Philip Lindsay, I wouldn't be surprised.
Not at all. And that includes the first-year production.
Yeah. If Penny Hart's a 1,000-yard receiver this year, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
Like, it's just insanity. Let's talk about Jacksonville. I just love the fact that Josh Allen went number 7 overall in 2 years in a row. Josh Allen, the quarterback, What's up, Bills Mafia? And then Josh Allen, the edge player from Kentucky, seen as one of the top 5 players, top 3 players, best player. I thought Quincy Williams, but still, Josh Allen was right up there in terms of ferocity, in terms of getting after the quarterback, kind of an anger and aggression to the way he plays. Very good. Jajuan Taylor, tackle Florida in the second round, 35th overall. Some people thought he'd be a first rounder. He falls into the early second round. Josh Oliver, tight end, San Jose State, in the third round, along with Quincy Williams, safety, Murray State. Then they go to the 5th round. Raquel Armstead, running back from Temple. Gardner Minshew, their pick at quarterback from Washington State in round 6. And then Dontavius Russell, defensive tackle from Auburn in round 7. Let's go through what the Jaguars did.
So this is a draft where they got a few breaks, and they made a few of their breaks. And again, this is a draft where we have to tell the story going into the draft. They get a 3rd round pick for Dante Fowler. They give up a 5th round pick for Carlos Hyde. They give up a 7th round pick for Cody Kessler. They just sit there, and Dave Gettleman gets the assist as they have Josh Allen fall to them at number 7. Josh Allen athletically is what you want. High level of production against the SEC. A lot of players said that he was their toughest competition. Smart player, great in space also. So has some strong side linebacker to him, but with Yannick Ngakoue probably getting paid next year as a pass rusher, Josh Allen falling to them to take over at a much cheaper price is beautiful. And this defense hopefully help them get some of their swag back. Then you get Jajuan Taylor. I guess there was some medical issue maybe that caused him to fall to the 1st round. Some thought that Taylor could have went to Jacksonville or around that pick. Jonah Williams was mocked to that more, but right around that pick. And they get him in the 3rd and the 2nd, and they move up just a little bit to get him. He's a day 1 starting right tackle for this team. They get a pass catching tight end in Josh Oliver. And as soon as you would say, "Cease, pass catching tight end for the Jags," you'd be like, "No, I don't really want." Right. But Nick Foles, it's Nick Foles.
Yeah.
So he could lean on a player like Josh Oliver. And then you get the pick that really and truly, and I mean, even people like Lance Zierlein that profile 500 players. If you like watching the NFL Network coverage, when it's the 3rd round, I mean, this happens in the 5th, 6th, 7th round. When it's the 3rd round and the coverage team is scrambling, there's no footage of the player. There's no scouting report. Quincy Williams. Quincy Williams is Quinnen Williams' little brother. And I guess emphasize little when you're talking about Quinnen Williams' little brother.
Right.
And Telvin Smith, I think, didn't show up to voluntary OTAs, and maybe there's some talk that
Grandpa Coughlin's mad.
Yeah, so he's like a Telvin Smith type, where he run. But this was a pick. I think they spent, David Caldwell, etc., spent more time defending this pick than anything else, because everyone said, "Who? Huh? Little brother, I guess." Okay. They get Raquel Armstead in the 5th, and what's interesting here again is, like, speaking of players Grandpa Coughlin might not be giving the Werthers to, that's Leonard Fournette. Armstead, second best running back on this team, some speed and some toughness, power running inside. Gardner Minshew. It's funny that they gave up a 7th round pick to get Cody Kessler, because that's basically Gardner Minshew. Smart, accurate, doesn't really have much to offer, projects as a backup. And then they get Dontavius Russell, another player to eat up some snaps inside. But having Josh Allen fall to them and making that move to make sure they get Jajuan Taylor, that's really going to make this draft for them. The rest of the picks are more inconsequential.
Undrafted free agents that I'll point out, and again, kind of thought the Broncos would take him, but Andrew Wingard, the safety from Wyoming, is from Arvada here in Colorado. He was like a Gatorade High School Player of the Year here. Flies around the field, nose for the football, a great hair too, by the way, Bloom. Andrew Wingard is the guy I will highlight for the Jags. How about you?
Yeah, I like actually a handful of these guys. Starting with Tyree Brady. I'm not sure if he's necessarily going to make the team in a numbers game at wide receiver, but I like the speed. I like the way he, for his size, I like the way he plays the ball at the catch point. And so many wide receivers and running backs among these undrafted free agents to like. They get Joe Giles Harris. And see, stop me if you heard this one before, okay? A linebacker who's not that athletic, but just is always around the ball, always making plays, leader of the defense. Those guys, you get them as undrafted free agents, they'll work. I remember Joe Mays.
Oh, of course, yeah.
The Joe Giles Harris, another Joe here. And then they get Savion Smith. and you get a piece. It's like the Steelers getting bugs in like the 6th round. You get a piece of the Alabama defense, a cornerback. I mean, he is definitely, because it's Alabama, he's athletic enough. He's strong enough. I mean, he's big enough. He looks like an NFL player. So we'll see if he works out. But you get a player like that, an Alabama starting defensive player outside the draft, you done well.
Thank you very much. Tennessee Titans up next, and an interesting draft class and some interesting UDFAs. So a lot to get to here with the Titans, so we won't mess around. Jeffrey Simmons, defensive tackle, Mississippi State. Titans are saying, we'll wait. We will wait for that talent. No need to wait for the talent of A.J. Brown. He's right there, wide receiver of Mississippi. 2nd round pick. And 51, too. Like, okay, the hype around Mr. Muscles, DK Metcalf, our new David Boston. Minus the supplements. But AJ Brown, okay. People said, oh, let's watch this guy in the 1st round, get him at 51. Good job, Tennessee. Nate Davis, guard. And then he was the 3rd round pick, Amani Hooker, safety from Iowa in the 4th round. DeAndre Walker, edge from Georgia, and David Long, who I really loved at West Virginia. If you were looking for inside linebacker help, there wasn't much. There was the Devons, and then there was a bunch of other stuff. But Long was a player that stood out to me because of that aggressive play and nose for the ball. So that was the 6th round pick there. So Tennessee, interesting names, interesting games, and I guess the waiting game when it comes to Jeffrey Simmons.
Yeah, and a very bold move, especially with the draft in Nashville, because you're telling your player, get excited about this 1st round pick, who's probably not going to play until next year. But he can be as impactful as Quincy Williams, as impactful as Ed Oliver has been, has the tape to show that. So I think it's a solid move. By the way, remember, they traded a 6th round for Kamale Correa. They got a 6th rounder back for Ryan Tannehill. I'm sorry, they got a 6th back in the Ryan Tannehill trade. Remember, they gave him a 4th next year. So just to set up their draft a little bit. They get A.J. Brown. I love A.J. Brown, the player. I love him. I don't know if Marcus Mariota is the kind of quarterback to make the most out of him, because this is a player a la Juju Smith-Schuster, who, he's big. He can run routes. He's a player that's very smart and refined as a route runner, but also it's when the play breaks down or doing those little things that are off script that I think is the special sauce for A.J. Brown. And I've said it again. I'll say it again. I'll say it again. We evaluate quarterbacks and how they play outside of structure, because that's a big part of the game in the NFL, much bigger than it is in college. Why aren't we doing the same thing for wide receivers? And I think that A.J. Brown is somebody who definitely passes muster there, but you don't think of Marcus Mariota as the guy who's extending plays and making inspired plays with his field vision or ability to throw off of odd platforms and things like that. So, they just signed Adam Humphries, so that takes Brown out of the slot. I mean, he can definitely be a running mate with Corey Davis if you're looking for that role. Maybe somebody like one of the speed receivers we talked about would have been a little bit better. I love A.J. Brown, the player. I don't know if this is the best place for him to land in terms of fantasy production or in terms of the ability to get more out of the quarterback. Love the interior line picks on the 2nd day and even in the 1st round. Nate Davis is going to probably start. This was a team a la Atlanta, had some problems at guard, made some moves this offseason to address guard, but now here is a long-term power starter, big, quick. And you get Amani Hooker. A lot of people liked Amani Hooker. This was a player that a lot of people had mocked, even in the 2nd round. He is yet another one, a tweener. Can cover tight ends, can play the run with zest, a safety linebacker, big nickel linebacker type. A lot of really interesting players here. DeAndre Walker, another edge from the SEC. Certainly somebody you can think about as a potential rotational pass rusher, passing down helper. And David Long. And David Long was hyper productive, made a ton of big plays for West Virginia. Downhill, flies, plays with his hair on fire kind of guy. Not the most disciplined. So, if you're the kind of linebacker coach or defensive coordinator that says, it's really important, this is your assignment, this is your gap, you don't abandon that, maybe David Long is not your guy. But if you like a guy who just plays with reckless abandon and goes after the ball and makes things happen, David Long is that guy. So he's going to be an interesting one to watch, as they got him very late in the 6th round.
They got Peyton Hillis undrafted.
Yeah.
The closest back that I see to Peyton Hillis, as I look over their undrafted free agents, and Alex Barnes, the running back from Kansas State. Now, why do I say Peyton Hillis? Because one, he's huge. Two, he catches well. And two, he's got a pretty good nose, pretty good instincts for running the football. So good job, Tennessee. You finally figured out how to use Derrick Henry. And now you got Alex Barnes to work in the mix somehow. I like that move.
Yeah, they've had some good pickups here. Alex Barnes had an amazing combine. I really thought after his combine, he was certainly going to get drafted. And you say Peyton Hillis, I'll say James Conner, the type of player he is. Now, when I first evaluated Barnes before the combine, I wasn't sure about his burst. I wasn't sure about how he was going to translate to the NFL. And the numbers he put up at the combine aren't always numbers that you see on his tape at Kansas State, but it's enough to make him intriguing. And you look at this depth chart, it's enough to make him intriguing because he can make the team as the third running back. Anthony Ratliff-Williams, a lot of people loved him out of North Carolina, former quarterback, can make the team on special teams. Hamp Cheevers, they did not take any cornerbacks in this class, which gives Cheevers a good chance out of Boston College to make this team.
That is a wrap for the AFC South. We got one group of divisions left to go. That'll be tomorrow for you, hot and fresh, right here on our YouTube channel. We certainly appreciate all of you for watching live, including when Bloom burps. I heard that, Bloom.
Oh,
I heard it.
Uh-oh. Can't edit these when they're live.
It's live, right? I mean, I can edit them for if you're listening on iTunes, and we appreciate you for doing that as well, right, and subscribing on iTunes. Do both. Give us that thumbs up, comment on the video, subscribe to our channel, and check out footballguys.com, our free daily newsletter going on right now. Also a bunch of stuff in the works and debuting and coming out later this summer, like footballguys.com, where your one-stop shop for all your fantasy football and football goodness and information. The free daily newsletter written by me and Bloom and our boss, Joe Bryant. So make sure to check that as well. Sign up for it at footballguys.com. He's Sigmund Bloom. Follow him on Twitter at Sigmund Bloom. The show's at the Audible. I'm at Cecil, Lammey saying thanks, stay tuned. And as always, stay frosty.